Okay, so let me give you a quick overview of how to use the simulator. So you come into the room here. First thing to do is flip on this master switch here. Powers everything. Push the on button once on the computer. Should start up. Now it takes probably a good 10 minutes for everything to, all the software to start. So I'm going to try to leave it on most of the time so that you don't have to worry about starting it. But we'll wait a few minutes for that to come up. Okay, the simulator is now ready to go, so let me demonstrate its use here. You can either climb in through the back, or you can, I made this like a door, so you can get in through the side if you want to feel like you're getting into an airplane. It's probably easier just to get in through the back though. Just duck your head, watch out for that bar. Pilot seat. I can explain maybe just some of the controls here, what you have. So here you have your radio stack. You won't really be doing much with that. Here's your flaps control mixture. It's usually going to be all the way in, except when you cut the engine you'll pull it out. So if you got in, it might look like that from the last person. Throttle control, so full throttle is all the way in, cutting the throttle is all the way back. Carburetor heat. You've got a bunch of lights here, light switches. These are all circuit breakers. They're just little plastic things that go in the holes just to make it look like the circuit breakers, so it doesn't really do anything yet. Avionics power, so that turns your radios on and off. Got the switch for controlling which magnetos are in use, and also to start the engine. And then you've got your master switch that hooks up the battery and also the alternator to all your electrical equipment. And then you have a primer here, primer knob, to initially put fuel in the engine when you start it. And you've got all your instruments here, so this is just a clock that you can use to, like, if you're timing legs of a route, you're doing dead reckoning training, you can put it on this timer. You can start to time those legs. You can reset it as you go to a new leg, that kind of stuff if you want. Or just like this, it's showing 24-hour Zulu and local time. Alright, or you can just turn it off. Instruments are like what I've explained before, so you have airspeed, your artificial horizon, altimeter, turn coordinator, and it shows you the balance of your turn. You've got the heading indicator and vertical speed indicator. These two gauges you probably won't use, they're just for navigation aids. So VORs you can use to navigate, and then you've got your tachometer. Here you've got shows battery usage, so it shows how much charge is going into the battery, or if it's negative, how much drain you have on the battery. Over here you have your oil temperature and your oil pressure. You have your indicators for fuel in your left and right tanks, those are in your wings. And then you have your vacuum gauge showing that the vacuum system is working. Vacuum system is for running certain instruments on your panel. Okay, so that's all the instruments. You have your yoke, obviously. I've set up the buttons on the front of the yoke here in order to load some specific starting locations. So if you push the leftmost button, it brings you to like a tie down point for your plane at Braden Airfield. If you push the middle button, it brings you to Lehigh Valley International Airport, the general aviation section of that airport. Notice that when I load these different starting points, the view looks kind of messed up. So in order to fix that, you can push the hat switch to the left and then push it up one, and then everything should be fixed here. So if the view ever gets messed up for whatever reason, you can push the hat switch to the left, push it up. Also, sometimes you need to look at the tail of your airplane, like when you're doing a pre-takeoff check. So if you push that hat switch to the left and then you look out, you can see the tail of your aircraft there, so you can check your rudder and your elevator. Okay, so let's just look forward again. Let's just go to Braden. Lower stress if we're at a small airfield like Braden. Let's fix the view there. Okay. So also I should point out, one kind of nice thing is if you have like a tablet, you can set it up with software that's very useful for aviation. So I use this program called AvAir. It allows you to, you can load charts in there so you can see the different airspaces, which allows you to navigate. You can set up a flight plan in here. It tracks your position as you're flying. Has information on radio frequencies for different airports and all kinds of things. So right now you can see here we are, Braden Airfield. It tells you the altitude of the field is 397 feet, and it also tells you the frequency of the radio that you should use there. So the CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, is 123 megahertz. So that's what you would use in your radio to talk with other pilots at Braden Air Park. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can also see, looking out there, you see the windsock. So we would want to take off into the wind, which would be that way. So that tells me, I know that north is to the right there, just because I know the layout of the airport. North is to the right, south is going that way, so we would want to take off heading to the north, or on 3-6 to be pointing into the wind. Alright, another useful thing you can do is, if you're really into this, you can load the manual for the Cessna 172 on your device here. So that's what I've done. And I put bookmarks in here so I can get to the checklists. So if you want to really pretend like you're flying the real airplane and kind of go through all the realistic procedures, you can have the checklists with you here. So if I go to normal procedures. So first, it has all these checklists for checking the outside of the plane, like sumping your different tanks to make sure there's no water in the fuel, just various checks that you would go through, so I'm not going to do all those. But things like what to do before starting the engine, what to do after the engine, when you start it and afterwards, before takeoff checklists, procedures for normal takeoff, short field takeoff, etc. So they're all in here if you're interested. Mostly I'll just, in this demonstration to speed things up, I'll just do things from memory. So, but I will keep this AvAir map here just for reference. Oftentimes pilots have like a knee board, and they'll put their their map, and they'll have a place to take notes on a knee board, which is really useful because oftentimes when you're flying you have to keep note of things. So obviously I don't have one with me today, but okay. So startup procedure would be, in a real plane you would have a tank selector. You would set that to both tanks, draw fuel from both tanks. I don't have one. Set your mixture control to full rich, so all the way in. Just crack the throttle slightly so that the engine can start, so it can draw some fuel. Carburetor heat off. All the electrical systems should be off when you first start the plane, because when you start the engine, you crank the starter, that could create a surge in the electrical system, which could damage sensitive things like your avionics and radios. So all the electrical is off. This switch is off, which turns on all the avionics. That's probably the most important thing to have off. When that's all done, in a real plane you would check the area around your plane and make sure that there's nobody around who could be injured by starting the propeller. Looks like my view over there is still not quite correct. Alright, there we go. Once I'm sure that it's all clear, normally I'd yell out the window, clear the prop. Actually, I should have probably primed my engine very first here. So prime the engine to get some fuel in there. Master comes on. You can hear the servos starting to turn in some of the avionics there. Toes go on the brakes so that you don't move when you start the engine. Once again, I should have said clear after I primed and all that. So I'd say clear the prop, turn your starter switch to start, propeller starts, and you can turn this back one notch to both. So usually you want to use both sets of magnetos because that provides redundancy in your engine for providing the ignition of the fuel. Alright, once it's started, normally you'd put on your headset. I don't have one here, but you'd put on your headset. You'd turn on your avionics with this switch. Then you see your radios turn on. Braden airfield. Remember the CTAF frequency is 123, so that's what I'd use. If for whatever reason that wasn't on here, okay, let's just change it to something else. So if I had some random frequencies here, I could change the frequency to 123 for the major numbers here, and then the smaller knob changes the small numbers. So now it's at 123, and then I can use this button to set that to be my active communications frequency. Alright, so that's the frequency you'd be talking on for your radio. And then normally, like now might be a good time to say, Braden traffic, radio check. Somebody might answer you, say, I can hear you, thank you. Alright, the one light that you need to have on all the time is the beacon light, so I'll turn that one on. Then I'm ready to taxi to my runway. So I'm going to take off on 3.6 because I know I need to be pointing to the north based on the windsock. So let's go ahead and taxi to 3.6. Now I'm skipping some things, alright, it's just a simulator, but just to speed it up for you. Not sure how into this you are, but you could certainly follow the checklists and make this as realistic as you like. Okay, I'm steering with the rudder pedals here. And probably at this point we should stop. I can check to make sure there's no traffic coming from the left or right. And then I would say Braden traffic, Skyhawk 716, back taxi 36 Braden. Just tell people that I'm back taxiing on the runway in case they're, you know, inbound. They might want to have a warning. I didn't see anybody, but doesn't mean there was nobody there. So back taxi. I can see I need to fix some of the scenery, like real Braden doesn't have all those lights like that on the sides. I'll go into this little pull out here. Okay, I'll point this way. I can see oncoming traffic really easily if I just point down that way, and I could do my run up right here. So run up is going to be, let's make sure my fuel selector is on both. It's a fairly short field, so taking off with 10 degrees of flaps is probably a good idea. Make sure the mixture is full rich, and then I can do an engine run up. So engine run up is I push on the throttle until I see 1700 RPMs. You can find this in the checklist. 1700 RPMs, and then I check my magnetos. So I check left magneto, and you see a slight drop in RPM because it's not as efficient to just use one set of magnetos. Go back to both. Should come back up to 1700. Go down to right. So now I'm just using the right magnetos. You see this, the RPMs drop slightly. And I go back to both. I can check my carburetor heat. The purpose of carburetor heat is when you're landing and you've dropped your engine RPMs, it diverts heat into the carburetor in order to keep ice from forming in there. So you need that when you're landing. And when I pull out the carburetor heat, then what I should see is a slight drop in RPM. So then I put it back, it goes back up, so that's working correctly. I can check my oil temperature and pressure. They're both normal. Fuel in the tanks. Suction system is working. I can also check my ammeter to see if it works. Oftentimes what I'll do is just turn off the alternator. You can see that needle went down, meaning there's a drain, a net drain on the battery. Turn it back on, goes back to just a very slight charge. Okay, then I can bring my RPMs back to normal, back to idle. Notice I've got my feet on the brakes this whole time, otherwise I would have been rolling. Next thing would be to check to make sure the controls are free and correct. You don't want any cross-linked controls or, a control that's broken. So if I look out my left window, when I turn to the left aileron should go up. It's kind of hard to see. The right one should go down, which you can see. If I turn to the right, left one goes down, right one goes up. Okay, that's correct. Now I can also check the tail. I push my rudder to the left, I can see it goes to the left. Push it to the right, it goes to the right. Pull back, the elevator comes up. Push forward, the elevator goes down. Okay, so it's all working correctly. Switch my view back to the front here. And then oftentimes what you'll do is just go through the full range of motion on your controls just to make sure nothing like binds or it's like stuck on something. You don't want that. Okay, so checked all my controls. It's good to check that your primer knob is locked. You don't want that popping out when you start to take off. You can set up your instruments too. So the altitude of Braden Airfield is 397 feet above sea level. So that's about what I have here. This is my altimeter, so it's showing me I have 0,000s and almost 400 100s, so about 400 feet, so that's right. If this were off, like if there was a big pressure change in the weather, then this thing would be off. It's a barometric instrument, so it uses air pressure to figure out your altitude. So I can adjust that to line that up with the altitude that I know the field's at. I've got my magnetic compass there, so usually you want to align your magnetic compass with your heading indicator, which is a gyroscopic instrument, so it's pretty aligned. That's about all you need to do in terms of setting up your instruments, and then you're ready to go. So if we look down, there's nobody coming, landing on 3.6. I can't really see behind me there. What I'm going to do is announce what I'm planning to do, which is to take 3.6, take off on 3.6. And then if I see somebody coming, I'm just going to get off the runway on the other side as quickly as I can, get out of the way. Okay. Normally I would hear them on the radio, but in the off event, you should have a plan what you're going to do. Okay, so I would say Braden traffic, Skyhawk 716, departing 3.6, staying in the pattern, Braden. Okay, so now I can taxi onto the runway. Use my pedals to control. Turn here and align with the runway. Get aligned with the center line here. Okay, it should look like right in front of you. You can see this is a pretty short runway. Alright, so then to take off, I just go full throttle. Maintain the direction using your rudder pedals. You can kind of glance at your instruments once in a while to make sure everything looks okay. And do the rotation, and then climb out. Climb out speed, usually I use about 65 knots when I've got 10 degrees of flaps in. Must be some turbulence or something that's making my speed change. Once I've reached about 500 feet, I take out I bring the flaps up, and then I continue to climb at about 75 knots. Okay, pattern altitude for Braden is 1,300 feet, so pretty close to pattern altitude. So I'm just going to fly a circuit here. So I'll do a left turn, assume it's a left pattern here. And also like slow down the engine a bit by bringing the throttle out. So I'll turn 90 degrees. You can see braiding off to your left there. Do another turn so that I'm on the downwind leg. So we fly parallel to the runway on the downwind. Okay, fly past the field here. Okay, now when I'm kind of at the end of the runway there, being parallel to it, pull out the carburetor heat, and then I can cut my engine. Basically bring it to idle. I'll do a power off landing. I may need to add some power at the end if I didn't judge the distance just right. So once my altitude drops by, say, 100 feet or so, then I'll make the turn to base. Also, I'm trying to pitch up to slow down. So I want this speed to be about between 60 and 65 for a normal landing. And you can see I'm dropping by about 500 feet per minute. Okay, put in some flaps, and then I can turn to the base leg. Okay, so basically a 90-degree turn there. See braiding off to the left. Let's put in a little more flaps. Flaps are good to kind of slow you down and give you a little additional lift so that you can land at a slow speed. Okay. Alright, so I think I'm ready to turn to final. Normally I'd be calling on the radio that I'm making these different legs, but I'm trying to explain things at the same time, so. Alright. You can see Metzger Field underneath us. So turn all the way to final. I can see I'm going to be a little short, so I better add just a touch of power. I can use my pedals to align my plane with the runway. Okay, cut power again. There is kind of this shifting wind, it seems like. Okay, I'm going to need a little more power. I'm going to come up short if I keep it up. Okay. Keep my nose down. It's tempting to pull back. Don't do it. Okay, there we go. Let the nose gently down. Wasn't the best pattern that I ever flew, but you get the idea. Alright, so now we can taxi back to the hangar over here. Once you're clear of the runway, usually you want to make a radio call in case there are other people around who want to use it, so they know you're clear of it. Clean up my flaps, turn off the carburetor heat, and then taxi back here. Usually you don't need a lot of power when you're taxiing, just a little bit to get yourself going and then mostly back at idle. Alright, there are actually a couple of tie downs in the middle of this circle. stop here. And then the shutdown procedure is basically turn off all your electrical things here. So turn off the radio, lights, cut the engine by pulling this out to lean. Turn your master switch off, key off. And that's it.